you have to say, Mr. President, before today we're not going to do that. Just, you know the answer, just shout it right out. So it is Monday, August 7th, 2017, and I'm going to turn this meeting over to Mr. Chandler.
We need to do a roll call.
Oh, forgot the roll call. Go ahead.
Judy Casper. Susan Walker.
Richard Apichello.
Richard Townsend.
Ron Chandler.
Allison Robertson.
Dick Anderson.
Kathy Steer, City Recorder.
Tiana Henson.
Dick Ford. Meeting's called to order.
Okay, so we have two parts to this meeting. One that Richard Townsend, Allison Robertson, and I will be working with, and the other one is Richard Apichello is going to be doing. And I had asked if we could go through the workforce housing part first. In both of the agenda items, there are things that are coming up on your agenda within the next week or so that we will be discussing. We wanted to give you pretty much a heads up on them, and also to make sure we're going in the right direction so that we don't bring something before you that is not in line with what you're thinking. And so we're going to start off by talking a little bit about workforce housing. We've discussed this in the past, and based upon my notes that I took from those meetings and where I think you are going, we are looking at a four-pronged approach to workforce housing. The first approach, or the first prong of that approach, is to continue the support of the Lincoln County Land Trust. And they are currently being operated, or their operating arm for workforce housing is Proud Ground. Currently the way Proud Ground works is that, and Allison will jump in when I say something off base, but currently the way Proud Ground works is that county, Newport, or us, or partners with them, will donate a piece of property. Okay? In some cases, perhaps not all cases, that funding from the cities or the county will be used as a short-term loan until the long-term financing comes through, and then the home is sold to a buyer at a reduced price. And the value of the reduced price is essentially the cost of the land that you donate. So that's really the price that your taxpayers are paying, is the price of that land. I always say the market always gives what the market wants. It just depends on who's paying for it. In the case of workforce housing with Proud Ground, the paying for it is the land. Now, the reason why that's important, that the land is, well, I'm going to jump back. The land itself remains in the ownership of the Lincoln County Land Trust. Now, the reason that's important is that we want to make sure that the second seller, the third seller, the fourth seller, and so forth, also are able to get workforce housing, and we just haven't created a windfall for the first seller who then sells it. He or she gets the value of the land in the sell. And so it always remains under the control of the land trust.
I have a question about that. How are property taxes paid?
You know the answer to that?
Right now, the homeowner pays all the taxes for the land and the home. In the past, the land trust has talked about working out a deal with the county to have the land tax exempt and have the homeowner improvements paid by the homeowner. But we haven't gotten that far, and there hasn't been a precedent to show that that's what we need to do.
So it's not taken off the actual settlement?
No, it is paid by the homeowner.
Now, we have had two properties that have been developed under this method. It's been a few years since there's been really any movement on that. Proud Ground is now, or the Lincoln County Land Trust, it's come with another proposal. In just a minute, we're going to be talking about different pieces of property to sell. A lot of that discussion is coming forward because of what the Land Trust has experienced. They've looked at all of the properties that we've had and have found those to be difficult or expensive pieces of property to develop. And even with the donation of the land, they're not able to keep the prices down because of the difficulties with the types of land, or the topography and so forth of the land. So they have made a proposal to us. It has been down before Newport, and they have been considering it. And that proposal is that instead of just receiving land or building new, they also look at building existing properties. Now, the difference in that is that under the existing properties, we of course don't own the land. It's nothing we can donate, so that there has to be money up front for the cost of doing that. So what they're actually looking at is the idea of being able to buy down the property, contribute a portion of it to the sale of the property. So if the property is selling for $150,000, and we may end up buying down $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, some amount of that, and then the new homeowner, through their financing with a financial institution, comes up with the rest. That's a different approach, and then part of what they will do is not only looking at buying property, but also maybe renovating the property if they can. The end result will remain the same in that if they buy down the property or buy down the price of the house, the property will remain in the ownership of the land trust. So the end result remains the same. Now the difficulty that poses for us is the land we've got, cash we don't. Right? We have in our workforce housing fund $124,000 to go towards workforce housing. Depending on the price of the properties they have and that they're looking at, we don't know how far that will take us. So that change in the memorandum of understanding that we have with the land trust will be coming before you probably within the next month, and that's just in a brief synopsis of what they are asking. What they're asking to do with that. If you are interested in that, then one of the things that we need to do is to try to beef up that amount of money that could be available. There's two ways to do that we've identified. One is that have been identified by the land trust. We have contributed $90,000 over the last 3 years. It was intended to be used for a person hired by the Proud Ground to run our program for us. They have not used all those funds. So part of the memorandum of understanding is to take that amount that's left over and put it towards the housing fund so that we can use it to buy down the property. The other, and this is something we had been discussing earlier with you, is to sell some of the remnant properties that we have and use those funds to also beef up the workforce housing fund. Now, since we discussed, actually within just the last few days, Councilor Hinton and I have talked about one property in particular that we're going to ask you to rethink it a little bit with another option and see if that's a better use for that property. So, are there any questions on that before I look at the properties that we've been discussing?
Is this $93,000 just for our use or for Newport and the county?
It's for all three, county, Newport, and Lincoln City have each contributed $30,000 per year for 3 years. And there's, I think it's $70,000 left that should be split equally, in my opinion, between the three.
So we don't really get that total amount, we get a portion here.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there a preference by the Proud Ground or the Land Trust of either of those options, the adding the money? Then I'm guessing that if we throw in $50,000 towards a house, then that just makes it more affordable that someone could actually get funding for that lower amount. So
That's
for that.
And right now, I think that is the preference that they're pushing towards. They have found that outside of our two properties, I don't think they've developed in either the county or the port yet.
No, and the last loan that we gave them for the new construction of the second home was $130,000, and that was several years ago, and even then, that was tight for them to do new construction. So I think Ron's right, that what they're looking at is really what they're calling a buyer-initiated grant, where they will match make the buyer and match make the house, and then figure out how to do any improvements, and then put them together. The land goes into trust, and the home stays with the owner. So.
And the real key point in that is that the land remains in the ownership of the trust, so it can carry forward.
I have one more question. So, because we have land, and are there builders associated with the trust that, or is that a whole separate, find your own builder?
Last time the trust did a new construction project, we put out an RFP, and we selected the home builder that way. It was just single-family homes, so it was simpler, and we have single-family home builders in town, so that was kind of easier to do.
I got some questions. When we talk about workforce housing, what are we talking about as far as income level, or what are we going to charge?
So the land trust is really targeting what they call workforce, which is 60 to 120% of median family income. And stop me if I'm taking too much time. So what that means is, let's see. Sorry. Let's see. So for Lincoln County, that's an annual income of $23,000. That's for 60% of median family income with a family size of 1.
So,
and then the upper limit is $46,000. That's 120%. Keep in mind that's family size of 1. If you want to do family size of 4 at 120%, which is kind of an upper limit, we know our market's difficult, then it's about $66,000. So that's what someone would, that's the upper limit. If you're a household size of 4. If you have a family of 4, the land trust won't qualify for a land trust home if you make any more than about $66,000 per household of 4.
So, do we know how many houses were short?
How many houses were short? That's a great question. So that's what the housing needs analysis.
The housing needs analysis just looked at projected population growth and then the amount of housing that's needed to accommodate the projected housing, but it didn't say anything really about affordability.
And
So the short answer, I think, is no. We don't.
Here's my question in the nicest possible way. How do we know if we've gotten there if we don't know where it is we need to go?
It's a great question. So the reality is that we are behind in being able to provide housing for all the incomes that we have. We're behind, as we are in pretty much every other city in the nation, behind the ball on this one. So every home matters. I don't know how.
But I think some of that is in your own determination of what that means, because you're talking about the market. Okay, the market itself will also deal with this issue. Okay, so for example, as supply grows, if we have builders independent of the city that are coming in and putting apartment complexes or things like that, that will drive the price down. That will drive the market down. And so, when you start looking at what it is you're trying to accomplish, I generally tend to look at this on a much smaller scale than on a market scale. And the reason is because it would be very hard pressed for the city to ever reverse the market. It's too big. It's too big locally, it's too big regionally, it's too big nationally. So some of it really depends upon what you are actually trying to do in the end. A goal, I don't think it's a realistic goal, is that everybody in the city should be in a house. And that's, a house they own, I mean, that could be a goal, I don't think it's realistic, but it could be a goal. So that's a discussion we've never really had with you, is to, what is, how do you know when you've been successful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just cautious. I mean, when I was in college, we solved the problem by having roommates. Problem solved. Nothing wrong with that, because that is a basis to work and earn more money, so you didn't have to have 5 people in a 2-bedroom. But it was just accepted. I have another question. I don't need to.
Council, before you jump to that, I guess there is one other part that we should make mention, that the formula itself also determines a little bit of the success. So, for example, you're saying we want to help those that are within the 60 to 120% range, and that's going to dictate a certain population that will be helped. If you were to say we want to go from 30 to 120, you're going to increase the size of that population. So just saying 60 to 120% also is a determining factor of what success is.
I'm just trying to be cautious.
Well, I think by the cautious part is how much money you're willing to devote to it. I mean, quite frankly, land trust has been in existence 5 years.
Longer than that.
2 houses in the whole county. And that was giving land away. Now we're switching, or they're proposing switching and saying, since the land is hard to build on and expensive, let's try cash and buy down. So if it's 30,000 a whack, you know, how many 30,000s are you going to do? And we control that, we the council control that by budget. So, yeah, my answer to you would be, you're never going to outbuild the need. So don't worry about it.
Okay, but on that account, on that side, maybe you can weigh in. The good question is what happens if we over-subsidize? Because if you have a housing resource that's inexpensive, you're going to have people take advantage of it because that's why you build it. And you don't want your labor market to have so many that it actually drives wages down because you've got too many people trying to get a job, too few jobs. So you actually end up, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually end up hurting the people you're trying to protect, because instead of one, right now, you can't get anybody for $15 an hour all over town. But it wasn't that long ago, it was $7 an hour. So to drive that down is actually, it's nice to see people making so much money.
And theoretically, the second part of our discussion, which will be on ordinances, regulations, things like that, will probably have a larger, or more long-term effect, because it's not requiring the city to spend money. And so hopefully, the things that are going to come through those changes to our ordinances will also affect the market, and probably would have a broader effect, because then you're dealing more than just with an individual trying to buy a house. You might be dealing with an incentive for a developer to put in an apartment complex or something.
It's not me, I don't mean to dominate this at all, but you know, the changing economy is, we're going to a knowledge-based economy where people become far more transient. You can get a job offer in New York or tomorrow, and when you're looking for a job, you cast the web out as far as you can. And I'm wondering if you've explored the advantages of building houses that are designed to rent so people can be fluid in their jobs versus not everyone wants to have this giant house on your back. You know? So are we looking at that at all?
Again, it depends on which approach that you're talking about. In this first part of our discussion, which is through the Lincoln County Land Trust, it is for home ownership. Okay. The next part that we're going to be coming to on two other pieces of property could be home ownership, could be rental. And then the third approach, and the fourth approach we're going to talk about today, really it will be the developers, the private developers, who will be making their choice as to whether they'll be rentals or whether they'll be home ownership. In those cases, the market will dictate that.
And I do think that in 20 years, the land trust can be a provider of rental housing. But there are very few land trusts that ever get to the point where they have enough sustainability to offer rentals. They even, on the East Coast, they even have, I think it's the first land trust that was formed. They also have live work spaces. So they have some commercial units where people who want to start their own business can go in and do a live work thing. So, but that's a way longer standing land trust. So.
Okay, and the last one, when we're doing these houses, when we work for businesses, we offer facade improvements. And I'm curious whether it will be the wisdom of housing, what your houses look like, reflect what your neighbors do. And I'm wondering if you couldn't stretch our dollars a little bit by offering the same type of incentives the city does for businesses as far as giving loans to make their houses. If you're a landlord, to make your house look nicer and fix it up so it's rentable. Or maybe if it's a renter, you could do something just facade.
We have in the past done things like low interest loans, or actually I guess they're loans, but for things like energy efficiency, roof repairs, those kinds of things. I think we exhausted that fund, but I believe it's a revolving fund, but the loans are repaid at the time the home is sold, and I don't think anything that's sold yet, so we haven't been recovering that yet.
Richard, do we know what the PRD situation is as far as licensing go? Are we seeing people coming out of the PRD markets at all?
Every year, I mean, yeah, we get some go out of the market. The one next door to me is now, the owners are living in it. So, it happens. We get maybe 30 a year or so that don't renew because they've gone either to long-term rental or the owners occupy, or they just sell it and the new owner doesn't want to have it.
So we've identified several pieces of property. We had some that we could not come to a consensus on, and then, as I mentioned, a new interest on some property that we've identified has come up. So these are the ones that we have identified the properties as to be sold. The one up on the top left is Northeast South Sea Drive. We're going to talk about that one a little bit more in a moment. The one on the top right is 3230 Southeast Fleet Avenue. That is by the Ridge Apartments. The one on the bottom left are two side-by-side lots that we own. These have some topographical challenges, and that's what made them so that they're not suitable for workforce housing. And the fourth one, which is on the bottom right, is our parking lot on Southeast 3rd, which is one of the least used parking spots that we have in the city. So it's these two that we wanted to talk a little bit about, starting with the one on the bottom, 1149 Southeast 3rd Street. That property will have to be partitioned into two lots because we do have a building that's on there and we do want to keep access to the waterway. So that lot would be divided into, and if you're still prepared to go forward with that, then we would begin the process with the planning commission partitioning. The one on the top, now that's a good sized piece of property to begin to create some housing opportunities.
What's it zoned as?
It is a residential zone.
And what's the size that could be built?
Remember how much we could get out of that one? I can tell you that.
Probably yes, depending on what you want to keep, you probably get 4 or 5 houses.
4 or 5 houses?
What about townhomes?
Townhomes.
Up to 10?
I think it would be about the same, have the same underlying density. You might be able to get a little bit of a density bonus, or get a 10% density bonus for affordability and that kind of thing. So if we do it as a PUD, it's conceivable. That's just off the top of my head. Most of
Now, one of the downsizes of that property is, of course, you use parking, which is always a premium for the city. And even though it's not used a lot, it is still used from time to time. So an idea that has just recently come to my attention, which I think has some merit and should be discussed. Councilor Hinton and I have been working with the folks that live up on Logan Road and some of the parking challenges that they have. And the idea that came up was that if you were to sell the Southeast 3rd property, instead of selling the Northeast Salasee Drive, we use that to create a parking area for the roads in there. Now, one thing I haven't been able to do is to figure out a parking configuration, so I don't know how much parking you would be able to get, but it's 0.64 acres of property. And so, and part of what we looked at was that, of course, parking is expensive to develop, and you could use the sell either all or part of the property on Southeast 3rd to use to fund the build parking lot on the Northeast Salasee Drive. Now, that doesn't to do that would not take you as far on the workforce housing of having the funds available, but you may very well have two competing priorities, parking and workforce housing, that you may have to judge which one you need to do with that. So this is what we wanted to have a discussion on.
If I could just add, I'm not very good at this, but I made a little map, and I didn't print out a lot, I should have, but, so this is this little property that we're talking about on Salasee Drive, right there. And right there is the state park. So it would provide, I mean, I don't know if any of you have been down there in the last week, but with the exception of today, it was really difficult to drive through the parking area and up through on Logan Road. But anyway, so here's this, and here's the Knoll Trailhead number 1. A little bit. Okay, and so here's the Knoll Trailhead number 1. Here's the Knoll Trailhead number 2. So this parking would provide, because there's only enough spaces here, I think, for like maybe 3 cars at the most. And up here, only 2. And this person's getting a little bit irritated because too many people park up here. But there's no turnaround. So you have to, almost unless you're very, very careful, you have to use private driveways in order to get turned around. It's impossible. And this one, there's a gate right there. And so between the gate and the road, before it turns, that could even, I'm not sure if we own that property or what, but that could be turned into a little bit better parking situation. But because there's so much interest in the Knoll and the Thumb, we don't need to talk about that today, but because there's so much interest out here, people are using, their internet to find it. And so it's going to, at a point, it might get overused, but right now, it just needs parking because it's cluttering up the neighborhood pretty bad, all the parking. But anyway, so that was.
So what we are bringing before you is to identify properties to sell. So the question that we really have before you is whether or not, in this first case, do you want to keep the Salasee property as property to sell, or do you want to keep that property with the idea that it can become parking?
So if we're going to make it parking, if there's no businesses that runs in, then what's the parking?
Tourists.
It's crowded.
Well, I know, but
So many cars.
Are people leaving because there's no parking? Well, if that's true, then
No, they're parking on people's,
okay. I wasn't clear more, right?
and it's over full.
Yeah, I mean, to create parking, people are gonna put their cars there, and then there'll still be more demand.
How visible is that property from the state park?
Well, there's a bit of a turn there, as you can, I think, up
I'm
there.
afraid we're.
The state park is right here, and it's right here. There's the wetland right there,
Yeah.
and so it's just right beyond the
Maybe you
wetland.
can see it as you head north on
Now, there is another thing that's in, to add to this, with your question. And that's that part of what we're also looking at, this is the beginning of our wayfinding project, and having in the Roads End part, another sign that's similar to the one they have that shows maps showing where the parking is, and also another one of those signs at the end of Logan.
The southeast street parking lot is very close to the river, but it's not used because we don't see it. I don't want to create another situation.
Oh, this would be used, I can show.
I don't see the parallel with the two. Because one thing, the southeast third one is further away, and also it's on a one-way street.
Right.
So, people tend to not use it.
It's not very far from the river.
I think this would get used, yes.
But would it be used for BRDs parking, or?
Well, I think one thing is if you put like no overnight parking on it, then, no, chances are it would be overflow from the state park.
Well, you could put trailhead parking for, somehow indicate it's for the goal access.
But just to complicate things a little bit, the property is zoned residential and parking lots not allowed use of residential zone property. But we do own this property and these properties, which are almost all wetland, and should be zoned either park or open space. That we could zone it all park, then it would be allowed.
Isn't it, I don't remember when I've driven by it, it's kind of steep, so it would take a retaining wall and.
There's a part of it, there is a steep cliff at the back of it, yeah. But it's been there for years and years.
I'm just thinking of the cost. I've already mentioned the cost to develop a parking spot. I guess two things mentally that I'm thinking about is one, decision whether to take this off the for sale market to explore more about the actual costs of developing it as a parking lot. Attached from that, detached from that is funding. I'm not ready yet to say I'm willing to sell or have funds from other property go to the parking lot. And I only say that because here we go again. We've said often, housing is our number one headache and obligation. So I don't want to get misdirected as needed as it is. I want us to stay focused on housing. But I'm willing to take, I think at this point, take it off the block for sale to perfect the cost of an apartment. What does it cost? And then we can wrestle with where the money can come from. So it doesn't have to come from sale.
There's a definite need, and not just in this location, but,
But remember, again,
I'm not
we're not
asking.
going to argue about the need or not. It's one of the things that I think we are guilty of is we dance around a lot as a council. Every week, we've got another hot button. We try to do goals. Housing jumped right up there. You can't tell me that you don't hear housing as a number one issue. In
Did
this
I say
community.
that?
Yes, a few times. So.
No.
So I just put it on that and going to kind of push for, let's stay focused on housing.
So the question is, do we keep this property owned by the city, basically, is what we're asking?
That's really the biggest question that's before you.
All right,
I think so for,
yeah,
in order to,
to be developed whenever it's
well,
cheaper.
well, let's do it now. I don't know what staff's time would take and if it's that much, what's it cost? What would a parking lot cost there? Somehow we ought to get an engine. we ought to be able to get an engineer's estimate in short order to see if it's, feasible, and make that decision and be based on that price. Do you want to hang on to it? Develop a future in the future for the parking lot, or put it back on the market for housing.
So this goes to the purpose of the public hearing. Is it not necessary for public use, or is it further the public interest to dispose of it? It sounds like you're not sure if, well, as regards this one, whether or not you need it for public use. So for this one, you either want to continue the public hearing or re-advertise if you later decide that it's not necessary.
So, yeah, my concern is that a suspicion that if we turned half the roads into a parking lot, that it would fill up. I'm concerned that the quality of life for the residents, for you guys who are there, whether or not a parking lot would help the residents out to take some of the traffic off the street, or it would just be more room for what's already, a zillion people coming in. They'd snap that right up, and your situation would be worse. Everyone's house still has cars in front, and now there's a big parking lot full of cars too. That's my concern.
Yeah, I did speak with one person who lives very close to there, just right on the other side of the wetlands. And she thought that was a good idea based on her personal view of all the cars and all the traffic and trying to turn around and all this stuff. So, I don't know. Either answer could be true.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, you got somebody driving in there, no place to park, let's go out.
But I can
versus
tell you,
more parking.
if there isn't a little relief in that area and in the north end, we think it's a hot topic now, but it's ready to explode out there.
So the question, if I don't have a sense of consensus now, then what I will be doing is putting this on as the agenda for the public hearing. Actually, it is, because we've already advertised it, I'm sorry. This will be on the agenda as a property to sell. If you determine that you are not interested in selling, then you would simply adopt, you would change the resolution, I think is how it's going forward, and not include that. But we already have advertised all of these properties, including the next ones we're going to be discussing.
All 6 of them.
Yeah, and including a couple of other ones as well, and that's these properties. We had discussed these before, but had not come to a consensus on it as to how to go forward. So we have advertised for these also to be properties to sell. The one on the top one is Southeast Lee Street. Those are 2 parcels that the city owns. They are match for what land trust would work, and there's no plans for their use. And then the bottom one is on 6th and 9th Street down in Cutler City. The area north of that is the open space. And the question that we have discussed was, do we need that as a trailhead? Or can it be sold? Right now, it's basically being used as storage for the
Where is the trailhead?
There's trailheads on, so if this is all over the area of it, when you come up here, there's trailheads here, 2 of them. 2, and then 1 at the north end of it. So there's 3 entrances onto that.
So right now, there's not a direct access to the trails at that south end.
Now, the problem that I see with the direct access is that road is a dead-end road. So you're going to be bringing people in there just to go to that parking lot. The other entrances are along the road where people can then go keep coming either direction. And personally, I find it a little difficult thinking somebody's going to drive to that point to be able to get on the trail when there are 3 others that are north of that.
And the other 2 on Lee Street, was that properties that have to pay back to us?
You know the answer, I don't know.
I don't think about it. I think those were part of the city public works fund, so I don't know what the intention was with public works fund purchasing them, but.
Right now, the only thing that they do is get load.
Good.
And they're, yeah, they are wet. There had been a question about whether or not they could become a pocket park. If you go to the end of Lee Street, that is an area for future parks.
So are those buildable?
I think they're buildable. I mean, there's other houses that would just take different, fill and engineering. They're in the Tsunami Inundation Zone as well, so. But most of the properties we're looking at to sell are not what we want to build, have public subsidy for housing.
So these 3 parcels have also been advertised. So again, if you want to move them in, it's built into the resolution. If you want to take them out, then, or any of the other properties, then any questions on those? Okay. The next 2 properties we wanted to talk about are larger parcels that the city owns. The one on the top is Northeast 25th Street. We have one access onto that property, which is coming from the south. It's the road that sits right in the middle of that, next to our park. 25th Street comes in right here. Right here. We do have a 20-foot easement that's right here, but it's not a developed easement. And this is where we come in with our road and connect to that. That is property that, this is really more of informational than anything else. And really to confirm that we're on the right direction. This is property that we have looked at not simply in selling, but in working with developers that specialize in workforce housing to be able to create a development in there. We are meeting at the end of the month with a gentleman that has specialized in this type of development and has done this kind of work in other places to really lay out a strategy as to how that goes forward and to answer some questions about how it all works. So this, like I said, is really informational unless you were to say, no, don't go forward with this. And then the one on the bottom is the one that Richard Townsend has discussed with you in the past, using that as trying to create opportunities for developing workforce housing for us and some of the other large employers who may be interested in developing the property. The same gentleman that I mentioned will be speaking with him about this property as well and how to go forward with that. The bottom piece would need to be started by the north partition of those 2 parcels. A portion of that, of course, we would be keeping because it's part of our park. A portion of it is more suitable for housing.
The one above is multifamilies. The one below, the corner triangle,
It's
residential.
single family.
Single family. And then the other piece of it above the north of the park, is it all single family?
Yes. So, actually, these 2 pieces actually are one lot.
Oh.
And what we probably want to do is just break off, part of it, that for the skate park's in there. And then, this is really steep going down, but we could transfer the density from here to here and do like townhomes or something like that.
Now, these parcels also would ultimately need to be viewed as to be sold, but they would become ones that we would be doing in partnership. So, not just simply to sell them out. Any questions on that? Okay, the next part the next 2 parts that we want to discuss really are the ones that have the probably the greatest potential, because they're not dependent on the city putting up any money. They're more dependent on us creating incentives and changing opportunities. They do, although have financial impacts.
Excuse me, before we move forward, did we talk about Southeast 48 Court property?
Only as property to sell.
And they're steep.
Yeah, they're very steep.
The land trust has already looked at those, and they just said they could do a project if the income bracket ready.
Okay, thank you.
And what about the fleet, that first, second fleet next to the ridge?
Same thing.
Too steep?
It's not as steep in this way, it's more, it goes down and levels out. It's actually a really nice piece of property.
This is the one Habitat gave back to us.
Oh, okay.
It really is a very nice piece of property.
It's not that they can't be developed either, it's just that they can't be developed into workforce housing because the cost of site prep and so on would be too high.
Thank you.
In your packet, we included a list of all of the different recommendations that were made with the housing needs analysis that you recently adopted. We wanted to touch base on just a few of those that we've looked at and identified. These are things that we should begin exploring now, that there are opportunities that present to us, and what we're looking for from you is just, yes, go forward with these. And it's not an approval. It's not an approval that this is what you're going to do. It's more of an approval to start the process to bring things back to you. The first one that we wanted to mention, I'm sorry for all of the heavy-duty reading in this, but it is to revise the plan designations, zoning districts, and regulations as needed to implement the mix of housing indicated in the adopted needs analysis. Why don't you address that?
Well, the housing needs analysis had a number of different scenarios, but they projected what housing needs were over the next 20 years. And it would be primarily single-family homes, detached single-family homes and multi-family homes. And depending on the scenario, it was about 800 to 1,000 single-family homes over the next 20 years, and about 400 to 500 multifamily, and then a smaller number of manufactured homes or townhomes as well. So the idea is to look and make sure that we have sufficient land for, especially for the multifamily, where we have some fairly large areas that are zoned multifamily, but they're developed in single-family homes. So we want to make sure that we have enough multifamily in particular.
Any questions? And the next two do pertain to fees. The first one is to look at setting fees and system development charges on new construction of affordable housing as low as possible, while ensuring that the future infrastructure can be developed. Okay? And then the one after that is changing the way in which we apply systems development charges so that they're based on square footage rather than just a flat fee per house or dwelling.
Square footage or fixture, depending on how the analysis works out. Right now, what happens, if you have build a 6,000 square foot house with 5 bathrooms and multiple hot tubs and whatever, your system development charge is exactly the same as it would be, assuming you get a 5/8 or a 5/8 inch meter, be exactly the same as it would be for a 1,000 square foot house with one bathroom. So the intent of this is to put the burden of system development charges on the bigger things and make it lesser for the smaller houses so they're more affordable, to encourage more smaller houses.
In the scheme of all the development fees, I still don't quite understand where our stormwater master plan fits into this and why we're not getting any fees from that. It
hasn't.
Do you want to come up and address that question?
Are we going to address that sometime?
Yes, we're working on it right now. We're hoping for the end of the year. But it's 0.014 cents per square foot right now, so any new house is about it's about $20 to $30.
Which is, and I think there's a budget item that's $80,000 for the random store building, so that will increase that.
Yes, if we do these charges, and so we have all the, we've added roads in, so we're trying to add that into the plan and do that analysis, so we have staff working on it.
The guy retired, worked on his all our system charges.
Right, Ray Bartlett, so we have not replaced him yet.
So who was going to do this?
We'll have to find another consultant.
Okay, but we'll be done.
But first, we need to have projects, the mapping, the document for all of these review. So most of that work has been done. So we just need a little more time to add in roads and analysis and then have it to you. I'm hoping the end of the year, if not, it'll be the first part of next year.
Maybe before all this gets developed and going along.
Now, it's important to note that when we are coming back with these, that we'll also be wanting to present the other side of the argument, because there is another side of it. I've always looked at systems development charges as the impact of your system. And whether you have a 1,000 square foot house or a 6,000 square foot house, that impact may be just exactly the same. There may be no difference in your water, in how much water and how much sewer is going to be generated. There may be not. But just so you know, if you want us to move forward with the discussion, we'll make sure we try to bring back all sides of the argument so that you can weigh it out. The fourth item is that we currently give density bonuses in planned unit developments. This one looks at the idea of giving density bonuses in all residential zones, not just all development or housing development types, not just planned unit.
So what does that mean on your, so if building a house anywhere, to look at putting some incentives into the process?
Yeah, normally what you're going to
increase or decrease?
Yeah, normally what you're going to see on this is that you give density bonuses because they're doing something you want.
Right.
So in this case, if they are building homes that qualify as workforce housing with a subdivision of 10 homes, they might be able to get 12 homes, something to that effect, if they meet the criteria that we established for meeting that density bonus.
And today, the only time we would do that was in a PUD, is what you're.
Yeah, we have a 10% bonus for affordable housing in PUDs. We also, like, if you want to build a cottage cluster, you have a 100% density bonus on that. But we need to look more at like an affordable housing development that maybe isn't a cottage cluster or a multifamily that is directed towards workforce people we can have a higher density, things like that. It takes some analysis, just a couple of ideas.
The other ones that we wanted to look at is allow affordable housing throughout the city, and especially in areas with good access to transit, employment, education. The next one we know is a controversial one.
Oh, can we go back, I guess, and allow affordable housing? You know, what kind of roadblocks do we have now for, quote, affordable housing?
Well, one thing we need to look at is figure that out. But one thing I know is like for manufactured homes, we have a minimum size. We don't restrict those homes, but for manufactured homes we do. We may want to rethink that, or there may be other things as well. But I think in general we're pretty good at encouraging affordable housing. We go through mixed use, cottage clusters, and so on.
So it's just to take another look at what might be blocking.
Right.
The next one is we know has been controversial, but we think it's worth discussion, and impacts inclusionary zoning, which is essentially requiring a developer to include workforce housing within their development.
Right now, that's only allowed in multifamily for under state law. Multifamily of 20 units or more. You can require affordable units, but then there's incentives that they get back for that.
If the key word is cities are allowed to do that,
Not mandated to do it. The next one is one that we've already put in our budget to do. You approved this, and that's pre-approving ADU, affordable dwelling units, and other building and housing designs. You had approved in this budget for us to create a small number of housing designs that are approved, so if somebody comes in, that they can reduce their cost by going through that. The next two are periodically examine and revise the municipal code to reduce barriers to affordable housing and include in the municipal code zoning regulations that ensure multifamily dwellings and special needs housing are attractive for residents and for the neighborhoods. The reason we bring these up is that part of what I would recommend on this is that we get a fresh pair of eyes when we're looking at this. We're all pretty vested in our ordinances. We've been working with them for a very long time. There may be things that we just overlook because we're just involved with them too much. And so don't have a recommendation at this point as to who those fresh pair of eyes would be, but that would be something I would encourage, is that we have something from the outside look at it, and not just simply the staff. And the final thing that I have is that Villages of Cascade Head, we are very fortunate to own a very large parcel of property that can be developed. And so I've just asked Richard to give you an update as to where we are with that process.
We've hired a consultant to develop a new preliminary master plan for the Villages of Cascade Head property. They've been meeting with us, and actually, there are two other property owners of undeveloped land in the Villages property, and they've been in contact, at least with Mark Boyd, and I'm not sure if they're in contact with the one in Florida yet or not. But looking at coming up with a new plan, and in particular, figuring out what we can do that meets the economic and engineering realities of the site. On the 15th in your meeting, actually, they will be, that's Planning Commission, 15th. The Planning Commission meeting on the 15th, they will be giving a presentation on where they are to date. Just last week, they gave me their first work product, which is existing conditions, opportunities, and constraints analysis that will feed into this.
So, Richard, I have a question for you. It goes back a little bit. We had some significant changes in Roads End as far as occupancy requirements for the big sleepers that were there. Did your office have a chance to study the impact of that ordinance that regulates the occupancy regarding parking?
No. I mean, well, we haven't, I guess, we haven't done it, that's what you're asking.
Yeah, because all the information's there. This one that was renting out 40, which represented 20 cars, is now only available to rent 16, which would be 8 cars. That has a
Well,
But
that
that's-
hasn't gone into effect
Yeah,
yet.
that's not into effect until January.
Yeah, I realize that, but you could still determine what impact that would have on parking once it does get going.
I guess we could do some baseline, set the baseline now to figure out what the impact will be next year, but
You could do a guess. I mean,
No, actually you can't, because, you know, like, in a 4-bedroom VRD, you may end up having 6 cars show up. And, you know, who knows how many people are in each car. So it depends on how many people are in the car on the average. And you know, there's one big one that isn't a VRD anymore, but was. It got out of them because they couldn't do the big sleeper anymore. But they never had a large number of cars there. Unlike a couple on Logan Road, which always have a lot of cars. It just depends on their market, who they market to and who comes in. So, but it's possible for us to do a before and after look or something.
well, I'm just saying, you know, we're talking about building parking lots and things in. But if the effect of the ordinance, which was one of the things, the reason why we did the ordinance the way that we did it, was to reduce the impact in the neighborhood. And, you know what every property is able to provide and was providing versus what they will be able, you know,
Right.
they can. So I mean, even though the numbers aren't exact, you might be able to say that, you know, it's going to have 100 car impact. What would that look like? Or what wouldn't that look like with those cars coming? There might be less impetus to build a parking lot if you find that you don't have as many cars on the road as you used to have.
I don't think it'll matter, because you're talking about apples and oranges, I think, because the parking that we were referring to earlier on Celasee, that wouldn't necessarily be VRD people. There are people that come in for the day, like,
I would see it for day trippers.
I don't think that they're the same animal. I think the VRD people, they pretty much now, just over the couple of years, have done a much better job of parking on the property they're supposed to be. Some of them don't, but for the most part, they're doing a better job. Too many, sure. You know, the couple that Richard was referring to, but I don't think that that's the parking lot issue. I don't see that in the state park. I don't see overnighters
But
there.
I wouldn't say that's a parking lot issue, but it is a parking issue. And as that parking diminishes, now all of the cars diminish, which hopefully they will, make the neighborhood, it'll have a change in the neighborhood.
I hope so.
Yeah, you hope so. That was it.
So, back to the villages. So we've got a master plan that's being developed. Is there a rough date?
By the end of the year.
Okay. And what else is going on simultaneously, or should there be, or, you know, what are the next steps?
For the villages.
Yeah.
Well, once we get the plan, then I think we're going to go back out first to Fernwood with and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the guidance and assistance of a real estate professional, and have it consistent with the new plan. And then gradually, you know, depending on how the plan recommends breaking things up, we can put more and more land on the market.
I guess answering my own question, you just went through a whole bunch of pieces that will be simultaneously looking at system development charges, looking at fees, all the stuff that should help break the code as to, you know, why they haven't come. Am I right? Is that, you think these other exercises that through the needs analysis piece that we were just talking about, if we find things that are getting in the way for affordable housing or building, we'll be in a good position.
I think we can find somebody, but I think Ron has mentioned at the beginning, the number one thing is we're not in the way in general. It's builders don't want to build affordable housing, it's the market.
Yeah.
We got to do whatever we can to encourage that and to get out of the way of it. But
I guess that's what I mean by making it as attractive to build this house versus that house, you know, affordable at market rate. And we've already talked about that. If it means a land deal, we can do that.
Right. Exactly.
And so,
Yeah.
but even talking that way hasn't broken the code, from what I've seen. Now we're into this, my interpretation was, these guys are busy elsewhere, and it means they have to shift the crews, to a new site, which costs money. And so that just to me is another layer of cost that somehow we could find a counterbalance to attract them.
The one part of this review and discussion that I think is key, and I really have not found very many cities that have been successfully identified. Put all of these things in place with the idea that it's going to lower the price on the house. But what guarantee is there that it actually does that and just doesn't make the profit higher for the person who's developing? I think that's going to be a key when we look at each of these different things that we're going to be doing, is to make sure that we're actually accomplishing what we want to and just not increasing the profits for the people that go. And like I said, I have not found a lot of cities that have been able to do that unless they were developing their own property. So we'll make sure that's a part of it. Now, one final thing on the sell of the properties that we're looking at. On Monday, if you give us the go-ahead, or at whatever day you decide to go on it, you give us the go-ahead on the sale of these properties. These rented parcels, the first group that we talked about, I'd like to go through a realtor to do that rather than do an RFP. And so we have already put together a draft of a request for qualifications for the realtor. So if you could give us the go-ahead, that would be the next thing. That would not be for the big parcels that we own. It would just be those small pieces.
I have one question. This new preliminary master plan, that includes Fernwood?
What?
Fernwood?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a team question. The ADUs, pre-approved ADU use, number of residence costs, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
It's the plans that we've
Right.
heard this year.
The plans for affordable housing, we have in the budget money to hire a designer to develop those, to prepare those, and then we will have them available to anybody that wants to use them as pre-approved.
It's a pre-approved house plan.
Approves the house plan.
Oh, it's not like in addition to somebody's house, you're going to build it.
No, these would be more, just smaller houses.
Because other cities, I've been watching other cities, and they've done ADUs to seniors specifically as a
Yeah,
disabled.
we can do both. I brought it forward originally with the idea of just being, a smaller house that someone could save money on, like, use our plan, you can mirror, image it, or whatever. Your cost, your time, and your cost to go through the approval process would be significantly reduced. We certainly could do it for ADUs as well.
That's all. I'll just turn over to Richard for the next agenda item.
Richard or Richard? So I really don't need that much of your time. And again, this is a work session, so we're not taking any action today. Your input today will help me prepare for the meeting on the 14th. And I'm just looking for, I gave you a couple of questions in the council communication. For example, is anyone here really invested in keeping the incubation committee? Because it seems to me, and I'm recommending that we should just get rid of it. Does anybody want to make the case for keeping the incubation committee? Okay, so my thought process was I should probably prepare to get rid of it. There was a suggestion, for example, that we add neighborhood associations to the list of people that get notified by the city recorder when there's a vacancy on a committee, and it seemed to me that, that's a pretty good place to find people interested in becoming active in the community, so I was going to be prepared to add that to the ordinance. There was a bit of a discussion at the last meeting. Councilor Welke had some language she identified about council liaisons periodically reporting to the commissions that they were on. It seemed to me that most of you were okay with that language going away. It's unnecessary. So I was going to be prepared to get rid of that. There was a section I added, 204075, which was just elaborating more on what the council liaison should do. Some of you have suggested that it seems just to be unnecessary. You know, as a liaison, you don't really need to be told that you're going to be the liaison with the advisory board that you're appointed to. If you're interested in getting rid of it, then someone should make a motion to that effect when we get to the council meeting, in which case we'll be deleting section 13. If you want that section because you think council, it doesn't hurt to have council expectations when you're a council liaison set forth in the code, then you can keep section 13. But I just need a clear direction one way or the other come Monday the 14th, whether or not you want it or not. And I've had input from some of you both ways on that, so I can't say definitively it's a yes or a no. There was some concern expressed that if we start telling Kathy she has to put it on the website when we have a vacancy, then we violated the code if we miss it. And so I said, well, we could add it to the list language that says, just like putting an ad in the paper, she may do that. But some of you feel very strongly that we should use the website. So I don't have a clear indication one way or the other there.
So what is your question there? The may or should?
Right now, it pretty much says, right now the language in the ordinance is, Kathy shall do the following things when we have a vacancy. And there's a list. And one of those things is put it on the website. And we did have some language there that said something like, send it to all boards and committees. And Kathy asked me, please get rid of that because that's not something I do now. And the question came up, I believe it was Councilor Ward, was concerned that if we say Kathy shall put it on the website and we don't put it on the website, then gosh, we're creating a problem if we don't get that done. So I need to know yes or no, how important is it to put it on the website? Some of you want it on the website, others of you don't really care.
I'd like to ask the question though, is there one person or two people that are responsible for keeping the website up? Because,
Right now, no. Coming up, yes.
okay, because what I was going to say is maybe there will be an easier way for those things to happen. An email to somebody, put this on the website, put this on, if there's somebody it's their responsibility to do it.
If you recall, one of the things that we did within the budget was that we took the funds that were going to go from a public information officer toward another system. I had mentioned to you that I was going to have Stacy become essentially doing that kind of public information. The first thing that I've asked her to do is to look at our webpage and begin by asking who has the rights to put it on, who is supposed to be taking things off, and so we're in the process now of making that evaluation.
So then, when and if that person gets up to speed and has full control over it and can keep it updated, maybe then it isn't necessarily for the city recorder to have to do that, but for the person who's managing the website to get the information that.
My guess is that what we'll end up having is not just one person, but two or three that will have those with the guidelines and directions as to what they're supposed to do, what things can be taken off, what things can't, how long can they stay on. All of that stuff. We have some stuff that's been on there for a very.
We have some litigation right now where, and it had to do with our public meetings that, you need to place the notice on your website that to notify the public that you're having this meeting. Well, what we do to notify the public is we send notice to the media group, which includes radio station, television, or I don't know if it's television, but certainly radio and newspaper. And if we have time, we put it on the website. And so we have litigation saying the only way to notify the public is to put it on the website. Well, that's not really the case, because some people don't use the internet, especially older folks who just don't use the internet to find out what's going on. Some people watch the television and look for the announcements. Some people still read the newspaper. So there's a little sensitivity to just saying, you shall put it on the website, because frankly, it's not been our practice. But if you wish to make that change for appointive positions, then you can do it. I had written some language, I put it in the council communication that said Kathy may, but it's not required to, in order to comply with the law, put it on the website. But she is required to send it to the media group, just like she does all other public meetings.
So what if we do something like this then? What if we go to your May, like Kip suggested, and then maybe make it a administration duty? I mean, and then it's up to you to keep up the website or.
The caution that I would give on that is when you start in our ordinances having multiple ways of doing the same thing. So in one area you have to notify on the webpage and notification. The other one you just notify, but you don't have to notify on the webpage. It becomes very difficult to track that. It's much easier when it's, for whatever process it is, it's the same thing. And so what I tend to look at is, let's do what the law requires. And then if we want to do something else beyond that, then we make that as the May type of a thing. So that we always meet the law and we can't get challenged on it or successfully challenged.
So what does the law require?
Pardon me?
What does the law require?
Well, if we're talking public meetings, it's, we give notice to the public through the media group, and it doesn't specify we have to put it on the website, but there is no, law that says we have to do an ad of such a size in the newspaper of general circulation. It doesn't say we have to put it on the website. This is our own thing for filling our appointed bodies. I think notice similar to what we do for public meetings is appropriate and consistent, so we don't get confused. And using the website when we can to lessen the burden on people that have to look it up in the newspaper or whatever, that's fine too. But I don't want to say we absolutely have to do it. So I like the alternative language that we use. Kathy is not required to, but she's not required to put it on the website. That doesn't mean that we can't, and that certainly one of the things I've suggested to Mr. Chandler is that website duties be delegated and assigned, and one of the things was I said, well, I'm going to get a new assistant, and I like to make sure that the new ordinances are there, so the code is there, codified, and then the ordinances that are between what the most recent version of the codified code is and now should be there too. And I'd like to volunteer my assistant to put them on the website once they come from Kathy. So I think we can all kind of, in a sense, help Kathy with that task. Like you said, if we decide that's something we'd like to do, put it on the website, she may do it. She can send a notice to the admin assistant who can then get it out to the public. No matter what medium we choose to use, whether or not we tweet it out or, I wouldn't encourage that, but because we got to retain public records, but I still think it's a good idea to use whatever is the most effective form of communication.
And I like just doing everything by tweets now.
There was some disagreement also on getting the applications before the background and reference checks were complete. I think in talking to staff and talking to you guys individually about this thing, I think I would recommend that you, although it may seem to delay it, I don't think you should get the applications and supporting materials until the background is complete, the background and reference check, because why would you want to review something that, you're not going to be considering. So I would wait, but that's just my recommendation. You can say, no, I think let's get it and tell me later if, obviously in employment situations, people are offered positions and then later on, if they don't pass the background check, they don't make it. But this is more public than an employment situation. So
What's the financial impact of that?
we're still running
It
that.
depends, if the applicant has got multiple states, you gotta go to all the states, international.
But we're running background checks on everybody now before we give them to you to interview. I'm pretty sure
For the
that
ones to interview, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's no,
if you
What
want
is
to,
it, Kathy? Is it before their interview that we run the checks? Or was it after?
well, it's right now. I believe that they're sent at the same time.
I do the reference checks and try to get the background and the reference checks done before you do your interview, so. And that's on everyone, because at one point, somebody had said, well, we should only have to pay for the background checks on those people that are recommended. But council as a whole has to look at everyone that applies, not just those that are recommended by the subcommittee. So I think it's just a good idea to do the background checks on everyone, get the reference checks out of the way, because you need to see the reference checks and that before, when you're doing the interviews, before you do the interviews. But I believe that, if I remember correctly, the cost is like $25, maybe for a simple through Pinnacle, or $25, or it could be as much as like $50 if there's a bunch of different states.
I also had a question about the reference to 26432, which is the prohibition in the state law for political activity. And political activity is, and you can go to the elections website, it's the elections website, maybe. Yeah, I think it's elections, because 260 is elections prohibition. There's a pamphlet, a small booklet on what 26432 involves. So the question I got was, can you explain that a little more in the ordinance? What is 26432? It's the prohibition on employees engaging in political activity. Not only employees, but also appointed officers or planning commissioners. City councilors, elected officials are not subject to the prohibition, but at the same time, they can't direct staff to engage in political activity. So that's what that is about, and if you want to read that publication, I will, just let me know and I'll email it to you. So basically, those are there are only about 6 or 7 items that I was looking for input on. If anybody has any strong feelings, let me know, but I'm pretty much prepared to do the things I've discussed here. I'll be prepared to remove liaison unless you tell me not to. I'll be prepared to make the changes that I've talked about here, one way or the other. But if you want to give me a hint what you're all thinking, that'll be fine too.
George,
I'm still working off the very first printing of this, so I don't know changes that have been made along the way. But as I was going through it then, I guess I'm hoping you, Judy, or somebody brought up the idea of the definition, some geography, consistent
I
geography.
did fix that.
Okay.
In the council's communication, I pointed out that I went to the school district's website and they define it as north area. And so I just said, school district north area instead of Taft School District or north of Depot Bay. And so there's a map that was actually in the packet.
So I guess, one, I'm just mentally checking off the kind of things to make it look like all the committees have the same kind of stuff. The same thing, I'm remembering budget committee, for example, exclusively has to be city and residents. And so it should be so noted. But I think the other thing we have gotten caught up on is they're not budget committee member cannot be in any other committee. And I think it's important to so note somewhere in the general thing, so that someone's not looking at.
Well, we didn't actually put the budget committee in chapter 2 because it's pretty much a creature of state law and Oregon administrative rules. I remember a question coming up during the budget committee, and Allison, I think, came down to my office and was like, oh, this question's come up, and they just, Ron had answered it, and someone wants you to check, is this right? And it was a question about how many people are necessary to take action, and that's actually provided for in the administrative rule. So for the budget committee, and probably only the budget committee, although there's some statutory reference for planning commission. For the budget committee, it's all kind of out there, and I didn't repeat it in our code. I did say something like, except as otherwise provided in state law. So for the budget committee, we're going to follow the state law, and while we can use our own ordinance to deal with, say, I was talking to you about this, like if there's vacancies on the budget committee, or so let's say someone on the budget committee doesn't come to the meetings, and they don't come 3 times in a row, does that mean under our rule that they're removed? Well, unless there's something in the state law that says the only way to remove a budget committee member is this, then I think, yes, that will apply to them. But I didn't want to separately seem to try to create the budget committee in the code. I can, if you want. I can take the provisions of the Oregon administrative rules and the statutes on the budget committee and put them in our code. We'll just have to make sure we keep checking to make sure we haven't been inconsistent.
Well, let me try it another, because I don't think you've made that point. So there are 2 committees that I can tell, thinking of all activities, planning and budget, that have any kind of geographic or need to have any kind of specificity to it. Correct? I mean, can we? So in order to belong to the Arts Committee or the Parks Committee or, anything else, you could conceivably be from this, as any kind of geographic area that we sort of declare. And what we're suggesting is the TAB school.
Well, no.
Stay with me. In those 2 committees, planning and budget, also have some other requirements. Purely resident or just Lincoln City. Planning has a couple of specific urban growth boundaries, not Taft district, not Taft school, urban growth, and some employment kind of things. If those are still valid. I mean, I'm kind of wondering today if those are state laws like planning, or was that our forefathers that came up because they were overloaded with real estate. And today you have to hog-tie one to get one on the committee. So I don't know if that stuff's still valid. So I'm trying to, when I was going through this, trying to say, why can't they all be the same except for some of those uniqueness things?
Well, I did not, although I listened to you guys last time and I tried to standardize the reference to north of Depot Bay. And there were really 2 places where, in 2 subsections, 2 committees referred to, in order to be a member, you must live in the city or be north of Depot Bay in 2 places. And then in 2 other places, or 3, it said, oh, you must be in the Taft School District. So there were different references for what was essentially the same thing, not in the unified chapter, but in those individual membership chapters. I said, okay, we're all going to use the same language, Lincoln County School District, North area, and each one of those areas. I did not go to the general regulations and say, okay, you either got to be a city resident or live in the north. I did not do that because state law and certainly for the Planning Commission talks about membership and where UGB and same with the Budget Committee. So I didn't attempt to go mess with that in general. But I did make the references in the other individual chapters consistent, so we're not referring to the same area by using different terms.
The VCC also has some.
Industry type stuff, right?
Right.
And the Arts Committee has a, if you're a member of an arts organization within so many miles. So I didn't want to go and try to standardize those things. But I did want to make the reference to geographical area, generally north of Depot Bay, to be consistent. But I didn't try to change the Budget Committee or the Planning Commission. In fact, the Budget Committee isn't even in our code as a chapter creating the Budget Committee. It's created by state statute.
So,
Well, again, back to the Budget Committee, shouldn't we, in this ordinance, since we're combining them now into one, shouldn't the Budget Committee in this ordinance have a reference that reminds people, go ahead and reference the state one?
And I did that. I could do that.
But I guess more important for me, we've had, in my time, we've had 3 different opinions on who can be a member of the Budget Committee. Definitions of it, I forgot what the word is now. They kicked out Planning Commission people, they kicked out any other committee people. So I guess I would like so stated there that, if you belong to Budget Committee, or you're thinking about Budget Committee, that's your only committee, nothing else.
I can add the Budget Committee. I can be prepared to add the Budget Committee as a committee in here, reference the applicable state law. So just like I did with the Planning Commission in here, I reference the applicable state law. So here's what it says about Planning Commission and state statute, FYI. So I can do that, and then hopefully we'll have fewer opinions about who can be on the Budget Committee. We'll stop at 3.
so I've got a question. Don't we want people to volunteer for things? And if we do, I'm wondering the wisdom of putting in barriers if they're not needed.
I agree. That's why we went to a broader geographic, since we couldn't find anything that precluded that, except for planning and budget. Why not go from your draw area?
These qualifications for this position must be filled by this.
Gray-haired people?
Yeah, which I'm white. So anyway, I don't understand why we would want to do that to ourselves. I agree. And the other one, Richard, I know you addressed, but I'm of the belief if somebody has an unexcused absence on the Budget Committee, they're out of there. I think this last year we had a lot of trouble with nobody showing up for the budget. We were operating at one time, I think. Didn't we do 8 people out of the 14?
It's close.
Yeah. And people that volunteered never showed up, never said anything, yet they hold the spot. And that spot actually works opposite of a democracy. If there's only 8 people on or something get passed, it has to be unanimous. Yeah, which, that's not right. So, anyway, I saw that as a result. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions too. One is about under the Planning Commission, and that the Planning Commission would serve as a committee for citizen involvement. I couldn't find the definition for that committee. I couldn't see the reasoning for it. I don't, I have more questions than.
The Committee for Citizen Involvement is one of Ms. Richards' things because it's one of the requirements of Goal 1, I suppose, of the statewide planning goal, that we have a Citizen Involvement Committee. We have 2 resolutions, maybe 3, Kathy, that establish the parameters for this Committee on Citizen Involvement. There's an administrative rule on the issue. The administrative rule says specifically that you may designate your planning commission to act as the Citizens Involvement Committee if you explain to the LCD why you're doing it. And so rather than create another citizen board that basically would serve the same general planning purpose. As you know, the planning commission has a quasi-judicial role and then a more general planning role. And the Citizen Involvement Committee, coming out of statewide planning goals, seem to match that more general sense of why we have a planning commission. And they're authorized by administrative rule to serve if we explain why. So rather than put in a whole new chapter on Citizen Involvement Committee, I just said, hey, if we follow the administrative rule, the planning commission may serve in that capacity, and they'll follow the resolutions that we set out for how the Citizen Involvement Committee is to work. That it, Rachel? Did I mess that up?
In the past, we've had a real hard time getting people to either sign up for or stay on the committee for citizen.
And then the further past, we had a very active citizen involvement.
Sorry?
Before that, we had a very active citizen involvement.
Yeah.
But what's the long range for this? I mean, I don't have the resolutions in front of me. I still don't know the purpose. I know it's in goal 1.
So it's a land use planning, right?
Yeah,
It's just a
right.
planning position. It's not, a lot of people have approached me when they see that on the website or anything else, they gathering folks together and be involved, when in fact it is a land use planning position specific to that.
I get that and I get that, but I'm missing that the centerpiece.
It's principally to make sure that the public is informed of what's going on in land use matters. When cities like a new city is set up, or they set up a new system, typically the Citizen Involvement Committee is very involved in making sure that the proper procedures are set up. One thing that I think that committee can be useful for now is for digital means of informing people. I mean, we've done it, we comply with state law already, but there are things we can go beyond in terms of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And that committee can be involved in setting up that system or ensuring that it's set up properly and so on.
Is it your opinion that the planning commission now, as it sits, is the right people to do that? I'm not sure it is, because I'm just looking at it from a land use position, that you have all these things to do. You need to, make sure that people get the right information. So shouldn't somebody be sitting on there that's from the schools, of any variety of the schools, or one from the high school, one from the college, or shouldn't there be somebody from the chamber sitting on that committee to make sure that whatever it is that the land use topic of the day is, it needs to be out there, or how to reach people should be from that point of view, or from a realtor's point of view, or from the grocery stores? I mean, I don't see it as being the same people.
Let me jump in with the example that Richard was using. More and more businesses go to advertising towards digital. Cities don't have that luxury, because we have 3 groups of people. There are those that still get their news from print and television. My family is a great example. That's my dad. My dad would be not a turn on a computer. It's the newspaper. Then there are people like me that get it from both. We get it from digital, we get it from the internet, we get it from newspapers, we get it from the radio. But then my kids, they get it exclusively from the internet. And so when you're looking at a citizen involvement committee, or any committee, and you want to make sure the word's out, you got to get the people in that are in each of those groups. Say, this is how you get the stuff out to those who only use newspapers. This is how you get it out to only those people that are using the internet. And this is how you get it out to other people that are in control.
And not only how, but maybe even as a review of whatever that material is that's going out. Is your group going to be able to understand what this is about, or do we need to rewrite it for you?
Right.
I mean, and that's what I see as being a really good, functional group for planning, any planning purpose, to be able to reach out to everybody, all those different groups that you just mentioned. So I don't see the planning commission being that group. Maybe they oversee it, maybe they participate with it. And I don't know how, if it's something like you know, the rest of our committees and groups and boards meet monthly. Some meet more frequently when they need to, or they stretch it out if they don't have enough people or business to do. But I don't see this particular group meeting all the time. I can see a push for like new or different information that's coming out, but
As it pertains to what Mr. Michelle's talking about in this ordinance, you can have citizens involved in a committee that is entirely different from the planning commission, or you have the option to approach the planning commission. It's not mutually exclusive.
I can add a new, just like I can reference the budget committee, I can add a chapter, in chapter 2, saying there is hereby created the Citizens Involvement Committee, and I can put in what's in the resolutions, and I can leave the reference in that says the planning commission may serve as the Citizens Involvement Committee, and if you choose to do that. But if you want me to separately create it in the ordinance, I can do that. There's already a resolution, but again, we're trying to put it all in one place. I can do that. I really think of the Citizens Involvement Committee as being somewhat outdated in the sense that it started as part of Goal 1 back in the 80s, and when we, for example, in the 90s when we did Measure 56 for land use notices, and we had to send individual notices to people saying we're going to be changing land use, I think to a certain extent we reduced the importance of that committee in communicating with citizens because we started sending them individual notices. So I'm willing to put it in there. So there's a placeholder in case you decide to not use the planning commission. If that's, I'll be prepared to do that.
Haven't we also evolved with not giving up on citizen involvement, but in essence we've formed groups for a specific purpose for a shorter period of time? And I'm thinking of whether it's economic development or tax or the different study groups that are around. I think our committee system, quite frankly, shows the wear of citizens getting burned out because there's a lot of empty spots. And so I'm hesitant to add anything new. And certainly not at all uncomfortable with wiping them out because we can regenerate them if there's interest. But I think we're involving our citizens and we give them a purpose which they need versus, if you ask me to sign up and we're only going to meet, once a year, and I referenced the transit room tax. I don't think we met, but
I think I'm on that.
I do.
I get that,
So
I get that for the specific, but I was taking from this is more the cross of all the different interests in one place.
Well, the other thing I would
It
go
provides a
to
different-
Richard's point, though, urban renewal agencies, when urban renewal districts are formed, you usually have a high degree of interest and participation from more than just the government folks. That's the point. And then that, over time, once the plan is done and everything else, then that's where you see those being thrown onto the back of the city council. They wanted the same. So I think we do it right, asking people to be involved.
I think we've done a lot of outreach too, and we've done like the Parks Master Plan and the Nell Scott Gap, and we've had a lot of consultants come in, and we've certainly reached out and had a lot of focus groups. People, just because they live there, get involved. And then I think our neighborhood associations are getting information, and those are certainly concerned people who pay attention. And the more we spread out through those kinds of groups, I think the more participation and information we get.
That's what I wanted to, is I don't see this committee having a long list of agenda items for ever. I mean, it just, I don't see.
So Are you pushing for or against a
I'm still
committee
asking
involvement?
questions because
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
made,
Well-
I have a yes, no about it. Because, there's always a use for a cross-reference type of group of people to look at city plans, programs, land use issues. That's always good, but to have a standing committee doesn't make sense to me right now.
Does not.
Does not. For all the reasons we've just been saying.
I agree with you.
I'm agreeing with you. That's all I,
Oh, my gosh.
but I wasn't
Put it
sure
on
where
record.
you were going. Because I think we have public hearings, we beg for people to talk to us, to read this stuff ahead of time and give us some opinions.
We can always ask a few people to review things too.
Is there, I'm not interested in the chapter 13, the liaison, to, not that we're making decisions here by any means, but if there's somebody who thinks we ought to have council liaisons, I'd love to hear the arguments for it.
No, I agree with you.
Well, we already do that because we have council liaisons.
The question is whether or not we need a chapter in the council rules ordinance that explains what a council liaison is expected to do.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure that you're still going to be appointed to be responsible for the arts commission or the whatever, but.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get away from. I see this as you would be, if this went through with council liaisons in here, council would be making a decision at the beginning of the year to assign committees. Correct.
Which is what we do now.
But this is,
We newly do this now. So we haven't always.
The-
The only one that's situated in writing is, for some reason, the library board is the only one that's mandatory by their paragraph.
I would.
Yeah, but it's a long stand, and maybe there was a gap, but 20 years ago, there were liaisons.
Right.
Okay.
And the gap showed up again for the question of why, and we quit. Instead, we brought committees to the council, one, so the whole council got to know the people who were working for us, rather than just that one on the council person, so a wider attention span or introduction. And then we've seen we've gone back to needing a council person to hang out with the committee. And that's what I'm not in favor of. So
What bothers me with the current situation is we don't get a regular report from that liaison. If there's a liaison, there should be a report.
I think the report should come from the committee
Me too.
chair. I think the city council ought to be hands-off, to actually go and sit in and just
If you
monitor,
so
let's
wanted.
say, monitor, I've done that, and it's very informative, but that's because I have an interest, or I'm curious about what they're up to, or just to, see what the committees are working on. But I don't think it's my responsibility to tell the rest of you what that committee's doing. Further, I think it's beneficial to the committee to come and talk with us. And I think they ought to come and give a report quarterly. Let us know what the heck you're doing. I mean, I've been trying to follow their meeting minutes on the website, and they're not always on there. I'm always pestering about meeting minutes. And it's frustrating for me to try and keep up with our committees, and we should keep up with them. But the responsibility should be on the committee to let us know what they're working on. Do they have a plan for the year? And if they don't, why not? Do we need to give them something? I mean, heaven knows there's a lot of stuff to be done.
And every committee has a staff person, correct? To use as a resource. So the staff person should be the resource, not the council.
That's right. Exactly.
So I see there's a clear choice between the Councilor Anderson model, which is the committee comes and gives a report. And then once a year. You hear from the committee themselves. And then there's the other, which means more presentations on the agenda, okay? And
It
then,
could be written, and it could be quarterly and not just annual.
and then the other option is the council liaison. You guys divvy up the work in a sense. You look at the area you're interested in, you ask to be a liaison to that committee, and then you report what's important, what's going on. So you're going to need to make a clear choice, because that involves some language changes. If you're going to go no liaison, no individual counselors attending and then reporting, I'm going to have some language changes to do. If you
So
want
you just wipe out chapter 13?
well, that's one part of it, but throughout the rest of the ordinance, it does talk in other places about the city council liaison. So I'll have to do a search and make sure I address that, if you're going to get rid of the liaison, council member liaison role.
But we have twice already tonight, Deanna and Anderson have agreed. So, I mean, that right there.
You mark that down.
I mean, I have to.
I'll mark it on the calendar.
Yep.
So I'll be prepared to address that.
Be ready.
Richard, I'm not positive, but I believe that maybe in the code where it sets out our agenda items, committees, boards and commissions was one of those items. We used to have that on there regularly, but if you don't have anything to say, I
You
don't.
mean the order of proceedings?
Yes, the order of proceedings.
I can't get into the internet here.
Anyway, I think that it's on there because we used to have quarterly reports from the committees, but I don't put that on there just to say none. So I just leave it out. I think it's there.
Okay, I'll check that.
Those reports sure don't have to be elaborate.
No.
Are they on track? What are they working on?
Well, we just did have a meeting with 3 presentations, and when Ron got back, I told him, by the way, we passed an ordinance prohibiting more than 2 presentations.
Good work. Richard or Kathy, could you check on the library board? Because that is the only one.
It makes the city councilor a member. So it actually makes the city council a member of the library board. I can change it.
I'm on the library board, but I didn't think I was a voting member.
You are, but you're
It's the only committee that has that. I don't know where it ever came from.
I don't know if it's some statute that's dictating it. My guess is it's just the way it was written.
And so again, that would be another one to be consistent to not have that vote or requirement.
Agree.
I think you're going to have to sit together.
No, that's very dangerous.
All right, thanks for your input.
Okay, so,
Wait, I had a second. Just 1 second, I had another one.
I'll get you,
Oh,
go ahead, go.
under the code of ethics. I was just curious again about those fringe benefits. And I saw that, thank you for sending around the Hawker memo, but is that something we still want to do? Are we using it now? Are people using that?
There is an established policy, and that, I apologize if I didn't send everybody the document, but there was an edict by Mr. Hawker, January 6th of 2016, and in that edict, he kind of said, oh, by the way, I just want to remind you all, this is our policy on volunteers for the complimentary, whatever, use of the community center. If you volunteer at least X number of hours, and you've done it for at least this amount of time, you can get a 90-day pass at the community center, and that's our policy for volunteers.
And your families too, at some percent.
And, yeah, for some things, but I think the reason why he was retiring, but it had come up that a counselor had asked if they got, I'm a volunteer, why don't I get a free community membership? And it was like, well, because the charter says you can't have any benefits associated with holding the position.
Okay, are we using that? Does anybody use that now? Is that still current?
I believe that there are volunteers that use that, I'm guessing it's mostly the library, but I imagine there
We
might
do
be.
have volunteers that are using it.
Well, then should we tell our new volunteers that it's open to them too? I mean,
I think when people,
I think they're given that information, but I'll check.
I mean, I guess it would be available to a planning commissioner or to anybody on the board or commission that volunteers that require a number of hours. I don't know that they do meet the number of hours.
I don't think everybody knows that if we're going to keep on with it. I, for one, don't agree with that. I just want to say that. But I think providing food and refreshments during meetings.
Well, I know that the prior HR director used to let people know, but honestly, Kathy, do you have any idea if that's something that when someone gets appointed to a board or commission, do they know?
I don't tell them I don't give them that information and that, but I don't give them that information. I hook them up with the liaison for that, and then they get the tools they need, they get from that person.
So
The staff
like
person.
paid.
Yeah, the staff person, like.
I'll check with Kathy and see if she notifies them. But I think Councilor Hannon brings up a good point that was established by edict from the city manager. If that is not something you're interested in, I would like to know.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm not particularly fond of edicts because I think we're supposed to have personnel policies that address such things, but
There recently was an article from League of Oregon Cities that had definitions of that and talked about specifically that. And that basically the only thing that volunteers are supposed to get are meals and something. Anyway, I can find that, give it to you.
yeah, if we're inconsistent with something that's being recommended by the state, I'd say we should stop doing it. Just go with the state.
Meals and travel, I think, or something to that effect.
Related conference expenses.
Yes.
All things related to that particular
And
specific job.
if I could go through, I noticed I circled wording in different places on these appointments to committees. It's not clear to me in some places if it's the mayor has the authority to appoint or it's the council.
They added a sentence that said, all appointments are by majority vote of the governing body. So that's in the general section.
Someplace.
I saw that too.
Yeah, there may be other places in the membership.
Well, yeah, I just, my note says confirmed by council because it says the mayor may appoint one member of the board. This is Board of Appeals, so I must have been.
I know I addressed this issue by writing that new sentence in the general rules that all appointments are by majority vote of the governing body.
So when you do that in this, I probably missed it in the front, and then going through, the different sections of it, if it said, like in this case, something the mayor, is there a way to scratch it out of those?
I'll check for inconsistency with that.
No, I already sent my comments to him. I don't.
Richard? Huh? Alice? Dick? Kathy? Yeah?
I'll ask you.
All right, that's done. Richard, can I talk with you just for a second?
Adjourn?
Meeting's adjourned, sorry. Yeah.
Minute.
Cool is that?
I got the activity. My piece.
That's okay.
Right now, that is 15.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's probably on sale.
A lot of cities do that.
And that,
And they're just like, I'm not sure, but I think one of the big reasons is to show where tax capitalism goes. And it's real ineffective way to do it, because I've had a lot of people.
If they were doing it, it's like,
Oh, that explains that. So that.
probably
Well, they're expensive, they use it, and I don't know why, maybe. But there's a lot of ways to.
we have new activities.